We had this event planned a month ago, but unfortunately I was completely flattened by COVID. So I'm just so thankful to Cairns Libraries for enabling me still to be here today, and for all the organisation that's gone into it. So thank you very much to Cairns Libraries. Thank you to all of you for being here today. It's lovely to have an audience here. And this is my second time at the library. So this time, roughly last year, I was here talking about my first book, which was Those Hamilton Sisters. That was my debut novel, and I'm here today to talk about my second novel, which was published just at the beginning of April, and that's The Girls of Lake Evelyn. So thank you for being here. Yes, as Amy was saying, I'm a Cairns girl. I've been a local here since I was about 8-9 years old, so I've grown up here. I've also had the experience, however, of living in New South Wales, on the south coast of New South Wales. So coming to Cairns as a young girl at such a, 8 was a definitive age for me. I've had that experience of living somewhere not tropical and then coming to this place, which I always tell everyone is enchanted to me. It's something that permeates all my fiction so far because I just find it a really enchanted place to live. So yes, I went to school here, a couple of different primary schools as we moved around settling in, and then I went to Trinity Bay High School and graduated in '97. I then went to James Cook University and studied education, and then actually went down to Brisbane and did journalism at the University of Queensland. I'm just going to pick up my little book. So I'm now raising a family here myself, and my children are going to school locally. My husband's an engineer here in Cairns, so he's contributing in his way as well to the local community. So we're really proud of Cairns and really proud to be a local writer. So yes, this is my second book, The Girls of Lake Evelyn, which is set here in Far North Queensland. My first novel, Those Hamilton Sisters, was set in the fictional town of Noah Vale. South of Cairns, I always say it's around about the Goldsboro Valley area, or Gordon Vale area, and it's set in a little valley with sugarcane, rainforest, a creek, and it very much resembles the valley where I'm lucky to live with my family, and it was based on my love of growing up here in this area. So The Girls of Lake Evelyn is set on the Tablelands, the Atherton Tablelands, and once again it captures my love of this area, and an area that is just once again enchanted and so full of wonder, everything from your fig trees to your waterfalls, tea houses, and of course the lakes. So that's the big hint obviously on the front cover. In this novel I've chosen to showcase one of a volcanic lake, although it's based on all three of the volcanic lakes, and I've called it Lake Evelyn. So that's why it's The Girls of Lake Evelyn. So my second novel begins in 1958 with a white roadster struggling up the range road of Gravel Lane Road. There's a gate at the bottom, a gate at the top, and here's this lonely car coming up the range. There's a blonde woman behind the wheel. She's a socialite. Her name is Vivian George, and she's fleeing her wedding. She's a runaway bride fleeing the wedding of the year in Sydney. She's fleeing the Howard Woolcott, her fiance, the mother who refused to let her get out of the wedding, the man she doesn't love. She's coming to a place she's never been. She has no idea what she's going to do when she gets there. She just really has to find a place to escape this overwhelming shame and this need to escape the life that she's known. So the place she's going to is a lodge hidden in rainforest around a volcanic crater lake. The place is called Sylvan Mist, and it was found for her by her playboy uncle. It's a place for her to go and hide away, but it's creepy. So she's going to arrive there. She's tucked away in the rainforest on this lake. She has doesn't know anyone, and it's just this gothic kind of lodge that's full of noises. There's no curtains on the windows. The rainforest presses in on her, and she settles in there for the time being. Now nearby is the town of Barrington Downs, and in Barrington Downs there's a young lady called Josie Monash. Now she is the town's daughter. She's the local theatre director. She's the youngest of 4 dairy farming siblings. She lives on a dairy farm, and in between doing her chores she runs the local theatre group. Now Josie Monash is out to salvage her reputation by staging a new play breaking a local curse. Now this curse hangs over the lake of Lake Evelyn, and it's caused people believe it's caused the deaths of local women, the drowning deaths of local women. And Josie's going to use this story to stage a play. So Josie Monash is busy doing this while Vivian is exploring the local area, and these two women are going to come together. They're going to form a strong friendship. Through Josie, Vivian meets her brother Owen. In fact, she's going to meet all of the zany Monash clan, and together the girls are going to see what they can do about the legend of Celeste Star, which is the curse hanging over this volcanic crater lake. So this is a story with a mystery at its heart. It's a story which is set in a time post-war in the Atherton Tablelands when there was a lot of relics around everywhere. There's that rich history on the Atherton Tablelands which still exists today. And it's also a story of love, of friendship, and of two young ladies who are writing their own endings. It's a story of second chances and basically stepping out onto the stage in your own life. So that's what my novel's about. If you haven't read it already, we've got the lovely Cairns books here. They've got some copies, and I've also got my first book, Those Hamilton Sisters, here too. So I'll tell you a little bit about writing the second book, or what it's like to write a second book. But certainly I think I perform best when I've got questions to answer. So I'll leave lots of time at the end for any questions whatsoever that you have about writing, publishing, my own life here in the tropics, anything at all. So if you think of anything, keep it in mind towards the end. So I received a 2-book deal at the beginning of 2020. I already had been working on my first novel, which was Those Hamilton Sisters, since I was a young mother. So I'd been just sort of plugging away at that in between having children and raising children, just whenever inspiration struck, with the aim of being published. I can answer any questions about that journey at the end if you'd like, but basically it was a long journey full of hope and that kind of expectation that I'll be the next J.K. Rowling, that as soon as I submit my book I'm going to be discovered and so forth. So, you know, there was a lot of innocence there and naivety, not knowing what happens once that manuscript is accepted, not knowing whether it just press print, you know, really didn't know anything about how much work goes into the whole process. So I had gone through trying to get myself published, and I was actually at the stage of self-publishing at the start of 2020, and there was a very quick turnaround there where through my freelance editor I was introduced to a literary agent and then actually went out on submission. So when the whole world was just falling apart, my life was just going from this stay-at-home mum with a big dream to a writer with a 2-book contract. So that was rather in itself surreal for me. So having a manuscript which was pretty much complete and quite polished because I had had it professionally edited, I was going through the editing stage while I had this second book there. My deadline was in 1 year and I was to hand in a second book, and that was what I embarked upon at the start of 2020 with all my children at home, learning at home, with the pandemic going on around me, and I've got a deadline of 12 months, and as far as I knew, it takes me roughly 15 years to write a novel, so I was completely calm and very grateful to have my children home and very zen, and my family can attest to that. I said about writing this second novel. Writing a second novel, especially to deadline when you actually have a contract, is a very different experience. As Google rather helpfully told me, it's called or it can be second book syndrome, which is this, you know, the author's second book not living up to their first book, and so that really hung over me nicely. That was lovely, and felt a little bit like Google's revenge for not getting credit in acknowledgements or something, I don't know, since writers use Google so much. So I set out second book syndrome. I'm going to write this book. What's it going to be about? Now, luckily for me, before I'd actually even received this contract, I'd written the first chapter. Now, this is a similar story to my first book in that I'd written a complete first chapter of a book without having a plot or a synopsis. I just had that chapter, character, and scene come to me. So when I came to my third book, I expected that to happen, which I'm currently writing my third book, and that didn't happen. So that doesn't necessarily happen every time. But certainly for both my books, I began with, in my first book, 3 orphan girls stepping down off a train platform, which has rolled into this beautiful green valley. In my second book, it was this white roadster coming up the range, and she's just struggling and sweating and nervous, and I had that scene in my mind. I had the character, I knew she was running away from a man, and so I just wrote that chapter. I had the chapter, didn't have the plot, but we worked on that, and I set off writing. Now, I'd written about 10 chapters of this novel according to the synopsis, which was actually quite helpful. However, my agent likes to see the chapters early, and I thought that was quite an imposition on me because I don't like to share my work with anyone at all. But I sent those chapters away, and this was probably about 3 or 4 months into my year of writing toward deadline. And the book came back to me. She came back and she said, "Here's a cardboard cutout. You know, I don't believe in that. I don't think you believe in that." And she just managed to highlight everything for me that wasn't sincere and wasn't from the heart. So that's why I love my agent so much, because she just has this uncanny ability to see things I don't believe in. And certainly there's characters that once existed in this novel that are not here now. They're just gone. So I actually ended up writing the novel in less than a year. I went right back to the drawing board, and it was probably around about July, I think, and it was due the following March. So I went right back, cut it right back, began all over again. And on we went. One benefit of writing a second book while you're editing the first book is that you're learning as you go. So all the mistakes that I would make, and we all have our little things that we do all the time, all the grammar mistakes and the spelling things and the words. For example, I use the word flogged to mean steal because that's something I grew up thinking, that you flog something, and that's apparently not correct. So that's been corrected both times in both my books, that it wasn't, it's a word that we might use in Far North Queensland, or I use in Far North Queensland, but not well known. So there were things like that that I could learn as I went, and that was helpful. But the certainly putting aside my second manuscript to go back to editing my first book was, I realised how much I loved my second book when I just resented every minute away from it, and I wanted to get back to my characters, to my Vivian and to Josephine. Oh, I should introduce you to the girls, sorry. So this is Vivian here, and this is Josephine, and they'd become friends to me in 2020. It was a very lonely year, as you all know. We spent a lot of time away from our families and so forth, and they were characters whom felt like my friends. And in both my novels, they're young women who embody a lot of aspects of myself and people I know, but they're also my friends, and I care very deeply about them, and so I hope that comes through in the novels, how much I care about them. So we managed to get to the end of the year, to the school holidays of that year, and I locked myself away in my bedroom, and I basically had my husband feeding and tending the children, and I just wrote myself solidly through the Christmas holidays and got myself out with the book on deadline. So I was very proud of myself for managing to do that. What was most gratifying through writing a second book, however, was that I felt I had put my entire heart... Oh, hello, sweetie. He's a big fan. I'd put my whole heart into my first book, and I thought I've put everything I love about growing up in the tropics, being a young mother, pregnancy, childbirth, falling in love, just everything, my family, and I thought, well, I don't know that I can do that again. You know, that was such a sincere novel, and I don't know that I can do that again. So my second novel, I was just so gratified to see that not only had I managed to put my heart into it again, but I'd also managed to embody another aspect entirely of my growing up. So as I said, I came to Cairns when I was 8. We'd been in the south coast of New South Wales as dairy farmers. So we'd lived down near Narooma, overlooking the ocean. My dad was the dairy farmer on the property, and I grew up as a farm girl. I was the eldest. For those of you who've read the novel already, you might notice, well, you'll hopefully notice many nods, but I was the little girl who at 18 months of age would climb out over the cot before my mum had woken at the crack of dawn and follow my dad to the dairy, and I'd have my cloth nappy hanging down around my knees, and much to my grandmother's horror, they lived on the farm in a little property just over the hill, a little farmhouse just over the hill. So I would be there, we'd do the milking with my dad, I'd come home on his shoulders at the end of the morning, and my mum would be there with the porridge cooked ready for us. So my childhood going from this very, all my family was there, we didn't, insular small community, and then coming to Far North Queensland, that's something that I've captured in this novel. Now, obviously I wasn't lucky enough to be in a dairy farming family on the tablelands, but as we know, it's got a very rich history of dairy farming. So I've transposed a little bit of my childhood onto the tablelands, and also the reason that that opening scene begins in this novel is because of what happened when we came to Far North Queensland. So my parents, unfortunately, as much as we loved being dairy farmers, it was a really hard life, and my parents came to the tropics to pursue tourism. So my dad had already been driving big trucks to support the farm, and then he went into coach driving. So from the age of 8 or 9, I would go with my dad every weekend. I'd be sitting up the back of the bus as the coach driver's daughter. My brother would be there too, in a mini coach driver uniform, and we'd be sitting up the back of the bus while Dad was labouring up the Gillies Highway with all these tourists on board, off for the day to do an Atherton Tablelands tour. And we'd be so sick, faces pressed up against the window, and listening to Dad's commentary. And Dad was a big reader of history and nature books, and he used to have in our library just shelf after shelf of all these books, which he drew on, of course, for his commentary. So I was always listening to my dad's commentary, but being this, big-eyed writer who'd always intended to be an author, I was always telling my own stories. So my face is against the window, I'm looking down at those rolling hills and feeling sick, and is the bus going to get around that corner, and these stories in my own mind. And so when I sat down to write this book, that's the scene that we begin with, and that's what has fed my passion for this story. So I'm bringing in both my childhood and just that coming up to the Tablelands, and how much I love it. I mean, it's my favourite place to go, is up to the Tablelands. So so when I got to the end of writing this book, I cried. I cried as I finished writing the last few sentences. I mean, I cried at several places throughout it, but I cried because it had my heart in it. Josie Monash is a character who's larger than life. She's just this hugely vibrant character who burst onto the page in the fourth chapter now. She bursts into life, and she wasn't a chapter I'd expected to write, but that's where my heart came into this story. And so I'm really proud of what I've managed to do in achieving that. Now, just a little bit about the lake. So Lake Evelyn is based on all three of the volcanic crater lakes on the Tablelands. However, this one's probably got a little bit more of a nod to Lake Eacham because there is mention of a freshwater crocodile in this novel. I won't say too much more without spoiling anything, but I was very interested to see in the Cairns Post this morning there was an article about they're going to leave the crocodile in the lake, so that's very nice of them. It's been there for 15 years and no one's going to remove it. So, but every time I'm there, I'm always looking for this crocodile. It feels like a mythical creature that's there. But you'll speak to locals and they'll say, "Oh yeah, I've been swimming in the mist and the crocodile's right there and it goes past me," and I just love that. I love that we live in an area where there's safe crocodiles and not safe crocodiles. And but I've always myself found the lakes both beautiful but also so eerie with those depths. And I know when I was young, my peers and I always believed that there was this tunnel that connected Lake Barine and Lake Eacham, and there was a creature that lived in it and you could get sucked down through it. And then you can see where those things have influenced my novel. And when you read it and you learn a little bit more about this mysterious curse, which relates to the legend of Celeste Starr, you might sort of get that feeling of Babinda boulders. Now, that wasn't the inspiration for the novel, but it certainly gave me the courage to write about a curse. It felt when I wrote a women's fiction novel, perhaps including a curse in the novel seemed a little bit fanciful, but when you've grown up here and Babinda boulders regularly takes another life, and it's you just always have that sense about that place that there's things that perhaps we're not meant to interfere in. It's perhaps we're not meant to be swimming in places. So that was something that gave me the courage to write about a curse. So that's what my novel's about, and that's how I came to write it. I might open it up to questions. If anyone has any questions at all about the book, my first or second book. Actually, I will show you. I was very fortunate to get a 2-book deal in both Australia and the UK. So I was published in August last year in the UK for my first novel, which is Those Hamilton Sisters. So that's the cover. It's a different cover, more suited to the UK market. I love that they've all got their red hair there. And then this novel is coming out in August this year in the UK for the Girls of Lake Evelyn. And I was also very fortunate to have my first novel. It's being published in Germany in August as well, with a different name. It's Stars Above Noavale, and the cover's absolutely gorgeous. It's got a blue fairy wren on it, which is just splendid. And I'm also being published for my first novel in Sweden, so I haven't yet to see a cover there. So yeah, that's those. But yeah, I'd love to answer any questions if anyone has any. Yeah.
Just what you said, Averil, about the publishing in the UK. say, did they have to change? You talked before about the word flog and steal. So did they have to change any of the other language in the books?
Yeah, so that was probably a bigger issue with my second book because it was edited over a longer period. Like my first book, I had more time to edit, to go through the editing process. So there was probably about 20 points that came back to me around about the proofreading phase, where after the proofreader had gone through, they sent through a number of language notes. And you'd be surprised how ochre your language is without realising. And I don't know if it's living in a regional area, I'm not sure. I mean, I don't put hey on the end of all my sentences, but I know that's something that people laugh about a lot in Far North Queensland. There was, quite a few things like that, and just little things like a word for wine, or, and things that we say in Far North Queensland, but Australia more widely, there was quite a lot. Obviously, grammar and spelling and so forth was fine, but just the terms that...
Wouldn't that be part of the appeal?
Well, a lot of it was kept, particularly in the first book, but the first book we were actually changing a time era as well. So that meant we were very fine detail earlier on looking at all of those things, and you then have to see there's some colloquialisms we use now that we didn't use in the 50s, for example. So I was able to do that earlier on, but it surprised me. Just some things can be, the editor would say, well, this isn't used commonly, but it can be understood. It makes sense what this means. Things like, so I refer to freshies and salties in the second book, and that to me just seems obvious. But once we'd done the first reference to saltwater crocodile, salty, freshwater crocodile, then it was, it was fine after that. And I personally think, Trent Dalton's books, which are so beloved, that's because he's so Australian, and he just puts so much of himself and Australianness in those books. So I don't think it's to your detriment to do it, but it has to also be understood. You don't want people to walk away and wonder what it was,
Look at the other side of the coin there. I spent my first generation in England, growing up in England. Went to the Caribbean for 7 years, and then came to Australia. When I started to write, it was way down the track, 30, 40 years down the track. So I've been here for 50 years now. But I had the other side of things. I've got to actually put Australia into it.
Okay, right.
It doesn't come naturally.
Yeah, right. So were your books set in Australia or set?
No, most of mine are actually set, I swear.
Oh, they are, yeah.
My first two novels were set in England, in London. That one in London, and the other one in East Anglia, where I came from. My current one is from Gallipoli, so it's fairly, I can pull it all together. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah, because my first novel, I think I've managed to capture a lot of the heat, that seething heat, and it goes through all 4 seasons, but it's just what I'm breathing and living every day. So it's a lot of that, the seething heat and the cyclones and all that kind of thing. When I then started, with a novel set on the tablelands, and it's only over a 3-month period thereabouts, so, and it's over winter. So I enjoyed being able to then explore the rainforest again, and showcase the tropics, but not quite that seething heat. That's why we go to the tablelands, most of us, is because it's, it's just more temperate, and you get that beauty without that kind of insufferable skin crawling with humidity feeling. So that was really good. The third book I'm writing is set in the tropics as well, a much different area as well, and I'm enjoying that too. So I feel like you could write books set in here forever because there's so much, the animals that we have and the landscape that we have. It's it lends itself in a way that almost feels like a gift. You don't have to try too hard. I feel like if you're in this area, you almost absorb it. So that feels really lucky. But I would love to write a book set somewhere else as well. That's probably an excuse to travel around the world. I don't know, with my funds. So the first book is slightly longer. It's about 120,000, I think, 118, and then this one's about 115,000. So I will tell you that my first novel started out at 160,000 words. It's a coming of age story, so obviously it's their growing up, and there was just so much in there of their growing up that didn't need to be. So, and my youngest sister, Plum, who's mostly a child throughout the story, she so much that I had early readers before it went to publication who would say, well, when we go away from the older girls, I just miss them, I want to go back. So I made that decision to take, I had to, I didn't have enough room to keep writing her story, but I made that decision based on what really interested people. And so she kind of lives on in my mind, really, with a lot of what she's gone through. The second book, I actually had to add to it. So I was quite proud of myself not being so long-winded and waffling so much, but yeah, I managed to get there. I found having a synopsis was a lot more useful in that regard because I knew, and then I actually wrote what each chapter would be, even though I deviated a bit, but that was really useful for me because the first time I'd been growing up with the girls and inspiration would strike, and I have told this story here before, but one day I was writing and I looked out at the beautiful fig tree and I went, got a scene, know it's going to happen, and I just started writing it. So like here in this library. And I didn't really do that with the second book. I knew what areas of the tablelands I wanted to bring in, you know, the beautiful tree down by the water's edge at Lake Eacham, I wanted to bring that in, and I knew what I wanted to happen. I knew the mystery at the heart of it, so, you know, it was like a momentum that kept me going, which was really good actually. So I think I was a pantser up until that point, but now I'm probably a plotter. And I've certainly plotted the third book.
Yeah, and so you plotted,
Yeah, I have plotted the third book, yeah. And I always have this quite uncertain feeling, probably about a quarter of the way through my third manuscript, and I have a very uncertain feeling when I know that there's a secret and I'm just hoping I can pull it off. And it's quite unusual, surreal, remarkable the way that the brain or creativity works, that you consciously think something and you're planning and you're moving towards something, but then just the magic that comes into it, that you'll write a scene and you'll think, I can't believe I did that. It flowed out of me and I didn't plan that and I didn't think that, and you know, the threads will come together in a way that's it's just like a creative magic, really. So yeah, I hope to keep that wonder going, but also be a little bit more structured with my plotting.
What genre of reading did you do as a child?
Oh,
Special areas?
yeah. Well, I decided to be an author when I read The Faraway Tree. So Enid Blyton, I was an early reader. We didn't have a television, so I read all the time. And you know, that the idea of children going out and exploring nature and creating their own imaginary worlds. My characters are going out into nature all the time, and it's acting upon them and form. You know, they're everything from the creepy feeling to the wonder and marvel of it. After that, I moved on. I read everything from Goosebumps to, you know, whatever I could get my hands on. I loved Trixie Belden novels, and I would go to the library when we lived out at Warrie with this stack of novels I'd take home. You know, Choose Your Own Adventures were probably the only books I hated with a passion, because I didn't like making the wrong choice and I didn't like having to choose. I wanted to be read, you know, the story told to me. I actually started when I was 12. My grandmother gave me this the beautiful hardcover copy of Anne of Green Gables that she'd read to my dad, and that's what set my love affair off with L.M. Montgomery. So I've given some little Easter egg nods to her in my first book as well. And you know, the way she describes nature and the love that she has for nature is something that I felt in myself, and so I resonated with that. You know, she just loves Prince Edward Island, and you can feel it, and her characters love it. And so that was probably all through my teen years. There, you know, those, and Jane Austen, I started reading her quite early. But then I went through a phase in my university years where, and I'm just so ashamed of this, I would only read male authors, and I don't know why. I was reading, you know, like Thomas Hardy and all my dad's books, but there was a couple of years there where I would only read male writers, and I thought it was because I liked, there was something about the way a male, I would read Dean Koontz, and I really liked the way a male would write. And it's funny because now I almost only read female writers. So and I read a lot of the classics over again, and I'm constantly going back and rereading my favourite books. But yeah, I did go through a phase where I read only male writers, and a lot of the classic male writers as well. But yeah, I've pretty much anything and everything.
Did you find it hard to get an editor and literary agent?
I hadn't approached a literary agent at all. I had this idea that I could just use the slush piles. So I thought, you know, if there's an email address open to you and you can send your novel to it, well, if I'm worthy of being published, they'll just find me, and it doesn't work like that. The slush piles are are huge. I can't say what goes on the inside, but I imagine that it's a lot of work for publishers to go through those and try and find that hidden gold in the gold mine. So I hadn't approached a literary agent. I'd only tried those avenues. But when I went to self-publish, I just Googled freelance editor Australia, and quite a few popped up. So I actually went with Alexandra Nulles, who's a wonderful Australian freelance editor. It's something that I had to invest the money in. It's not necessarily cheap to get a freelance editor, but it was invaluable for me. Even the things that I've learnt from her still stay with me. So it wasn't even just about polishing up the manuscript, because I was publishing it myself, so polishing it up to publish it, but just what she taught me. And that, you learn, I find I learn on the go better than I do being told something. So actually receiving that back and going through it line by line and seeing everything she'd done. She actually did the full editing for me. So because I was self-publishing, she did the line by line edit as well as the big structural edit for me. So worth her weight in gold. I would 100% recommend that to anyone. I don't know about finding literary agents, only because I was very lucky to be introduced to my agent. So I knew that there was, I believe, an organisation that you can actually go to, and they'll have a list of literary agents that you can approach. Having been with an agent over the last 2 years, I couldn't recommend more highly enough having an agent. I'm not someone who likes to, I'm not very good at, fighting for what I think I'm worth. I deep down think that I have some talent and I can write a book, but I'm not necessarily someone who could say, fight for my rights. And so having someone who is going to go out and do all that for me and leave me to actually create the magic means a lot for me. I know that some other writers would be completely different and they want to do all that themselves. I felt that I had enough of an entrepreneurial spirit that self-publishing would work for me. I sometimes wonder what it would be like to be self-published and to have that complete control over it yourself as well. So I think there's pros and cons to both sides of it. But for me, having an agent just gives me a peace of mind that I don't need to, the business side of it, I don't need to think about as much. Yeah. Any other questions?
How come you have to change the book covers when they go to different countries?
Just the markets are different. So the covers that they have in the US, for example, are vastly different to what they have in the UK. So the cover designer that I had in Australia is amazing. She's published so many. Her name's Louisa Maggio, and she's just, when she posts all the covers she's done, it's every cover I've ever loved. And she's just so different. Some are a lot more abstract, and this one here obviously is very realistic and gives you that sense of the dense tropical sky storm coming in. This is a paperback size, and it's more, it gives you that beach read, I want to escape, which is something that I know I'm probably billed as in the UK, is escape to far north Queensland. And so that novel gives you that sense. And it's not, this one's very distinctly Australian, it looks very Australian, whereas this one, maybe it could be the Caribbean or somewhere. It looks, it just looks like a beach read. And I think that more general, this one here appeals to us as Australians, whereas this could be, I want to escape somewhere tropical when I get on the plane right now. Yeah.
And so does the lady who does your artwork, does she read the stories first and gets a sense
yes.
of what they are?
Yes, she has. Yeah, no, absolutely. So Louisa, what I really loved is there's a line in my second book where I talk about a flotilla of pink clouds. And so she's got the pink clouds there. And when I saw the cover, I've cried both times. When they've been sent through to me, I just sit there and blubber, because she manages to, it's the first time I see my characters brought to life, and I'm not fortunate enough to have a TV or a movie deal yet. But that it's the first time I've seen my characters come to life, and she manages to capture Josie's petiteness. She's a larger than life character, but she's this real petite character here, and she manages to get the colour of Lake Eacham, that real turquoise. So she did give a really lovely nod to my character Josie's favourite colour is pink, really bright, vibrant pink, and so the title and the spine are pink. And so she did little things like that. And the first time around, she put my name in yellow because although I'm not wearing yellow today, I'm normally wearing yellow. It's my absolute favourite colour. And so she's got my name in yellow, and I really loved that. I love that it's like a little nod to me in that. So I don't, the cover design itself, I don't have a lot of input into that. I get the final cover and, you know, they love to know my thoughts, but the only thing that I said about the first cover was I really want the girls to have red hair that is the varying shades of the characters, because that's their mother's red hair filtering down in varying ways to them. And with the second cover, I didn't even have to say that. She had, you know, brunette little Josie who's petite, and she's got Vivian who feels herself an oversized doll compared to Josie because she's just taller and she's the blonde there. So, yeah.
I'm just curious, you obviously got a very personal connection, you know, you say your heart's in the book, very, very personal connection to the work. Once you get published and it's on the shelf, does your relationship to the work shift when you're kind of hoping that, you know, then it's a numbers game and you're hoping it will sell? Does that personal connection to the work shift a little bit?
Not really, because the funny thing is, I can't speak for all writers, but I mean, we all have an ego that's both tender and, you know, quite, this is a good book, but, you know, but once it's written and it's actually a book, I don't read it again. I can't, actually, no, I do open it to randomly find a typo. I do like to do that. As the saying goes, if you want to find a typo, publish the book and then open it to a random page, yeah. So, no, I don't, I feel a deep love and personal connection to the story, but it's, I feel with a novel, you know, there's many novels which are best-selling, amazing novels that I've read, and I just don't feel anything for it. And sometimes I feel like that's maybe I'm a bit perverse or something. I don't like being told what to love, but yeah, I think we all read a novel and there's something of ourselves that we put into that novel as a reader. And so I just trust that when my books go out into the world, people are going to read it with their own hearts. You know, my heart might be in it, but, you know, it's going to mean something to a reader. And so, yeah, I mean, I've been fortunate not to receive any critical reviews or anything that's, you know, made me feel precious. But I don't read reviews. I don't, you know, once it's out there in the world, it's kind of on its own journey. And so I felt like all the girls that I've written are young women, I should say. You know, in both stories, it's almost like a coming of age. It's these young women creating their own futures and stepping out into the world. And then I feel like they really do step out into the world. And so you know, I let them go and they're on their own journey. So, yeah, and you know, I kind of trust that and they've all got their own little faults and failings and things that are frustrating, but I feel like if I care about them, that hopefully the reader will care about them, so.
Did you feel, sort of particularly with your first novel, because I mean, you said that you'd spent years actually writing it, did you feel that when you handed it over, you were actually handing your baby over? Did you have that experience at all? Or did you realise, because you were so close to self-publishing, that this was just going to be the next step?
I did feel that earlier on. With my first novel, I went out to beta readers. So I was sending out to people who had been reading my motherhood blog over the years. So they knew my writing style, which is my own writing style, and they knew the way I described the tropics, and I knew, well, okay, I can trust them as readers, so I will let their feedback come to me. And I was quite precious during that stage because that was the first time I'd gone out, and I hadn't actually been a part of any writers groups or had that kind of feedback since, I guess, high school and university, where you'd put your creative writing into the tutorial and everyone would rip it apart. Yeah, this was more a slow, drawn out ripping apart, where people would just come back and they'd say, you know, I didn't like that, and I don't understand that, what do you mean? And I'd be sitting there, what do you mean? What do I mean? Like, it's so, you know, so I went through that. And obviously the second time around I had my agent with all her wealth of professional experience, and she just knows what works, she knows what's commercial, and she sees when I'm lying to myself. So she would, you know, he's cardboard cutout, and which was quite offensive because he obviously wasn't cardboard cutout. He's gone, folded him away. Yeah, so sorry, you were saying, when it went to publishing. Yeah, so no, it felt like my baby in the sense of when I was first sending it out into the world, but then when you send your baby off into the world into an email address and then you don't hear anything back, you kind of, that was quite hardening. That really made me, that was a big growing up period, because I felt like I was J.K. Rowling, and once it went out, it would be discovered, and I just pictured them all passing pages and couldn't wait to finish it, and that was the naivety and the newness. And then I realised, well, there's many talented writers out there, and it's sometimes exactly what that publisher is looking for. They've got an opening for a particular type of book right now, and so I had to really learn that it's when you don't hear anything, it's worse than criticism in a way. You just go, okay, I'm invisible.
It's the void.
Yes, that's right. I'm in the void, and I didn't even bounce back. So that after that, no, not really. I'm not. I don't. When it goes, I do get. There's a lot of waiting in publishing. You're waiting all the time, and you hear you've got the offer, and then you wait another 6 weeks to get the contract. It's just everything's waiting, and I'll send off my manuscript the first time, and I don't hear anything for 6 weeks, and I think, okay, well, there's my career, it's over, they hate it, they just can't think of how to say to me that they hate it. And that even now as a twice published author is still there, is that feeling of, I haven't done it, I haven't pulled it off. But no, it doesn't really feel like my baby anymore. The process is quite similar to having a baby in the sense that, that's such a long drawn out, and you can't see it, you get these ultrasounds pictures and that's about it, but you don't see it until it's fully a book. So there's a lot of aspects like that, but no, I'm not, Once we get over that accepted, yes, we're going to publish it, then I can kind of breathe and think, okay, I'll do whatever it takes now to polish that up,
The beta reader process, with your first book, how many beta readers did you have? And then moving on to the second book where you've got your professional editor, did you do a beta reading process there as well, or did you just go straight to it?
I mean, I do have, I say beta reader, so I don't know if that's correct. Yeah, I think beta's correct, but it's one of those words when it leaves my lips, I go, ooh. So I do have, I call her my bossiest beta or beta reader, because she's been with me from the beginning, and her humour and her ability to tell it like it is, she's my one left now reader. Oh good, you've got one too.
My eye roll barometer, if I can get it past.
Yeah, exactly. It's wonderful when two women who've never met, such as my agent and my bossiest beta reader, they will have the same reaction to things and the same eye rolls and the same. That's really good, because then I know I found my trusted audience. This time around, I didn't go out, but I probably had about between 8 and 12. My husband is my first reader, so once he goes through the novel, then I know I can send it to someone else, because he doesn't read women's fiction, and so if the book appeals to him and he gets to that bit at the end where he's like shooting me looks when it's not going the way he thought, or he's turning the pages, then I know it's ready to go out, and then it will go to my mum, and then it will go to my agent before that. So but this time it was a lot shorter, and there was that feeling actually of, will this be okay? I haven't had so many people look at it, but I feel that it was again a process of learning. So this time around I knew what isn't going to work. I knew don't write 160,000 words, and don't there were certain things people just didn't like. They don't want so much of this internal dialogue, or they want the chapter to end 3 paragraphs earlier, and just leave it on a little bit of a note what's going to happen next. And so I knew all those things.
So writing your third book, you said you had a 2-book deal.
Mm-hmm.
Is it going to be easier to get the third published, or does it sort of start all over again?
No, I've been very lucky. Often writers will be with a publishing house. So once you have you've established that relationship with an editor, and you're in their stable of writers. So I can't really speak to 3rd, 4th books, but I'm very excited about the future. Hopefully I can announce things soon. But I'm writing a 3rd book. Hopefully. I couldn't say when it will be out, but definitely.
But it's on your terms now, isn't it? So instead of being locked into a time frame like you were with the second, do you get to write it?
Well, I mean, that would depend for different writers, but for me, I don't have a deadline yet, but I will have a deadline for sure. I mean, the publishing schedule itself, it seems like such a long time away when you think, my novel's not going to be out for, until such and such a month, but it's all in a schedule, so it's not like you can just say, I'm going to publish my novel next year at that time. So I can't quite announce yet, but I'll hopefully have a 3rd and a 4th book out in the next couple of years. So
how many like then sales are you getting from your backlist? So, you know, I only came to become aware of you with your second book, and obviously I'm going to read your first book. So is that, you know, how do sales from the Hamilton sisters?
I actually don't know at the moment how we're going on the sales of the first book from the second book, but I do know what you're saying, yes. And I'm like that. When you find a writer and you love their book, then you go and look at their backlist. And yeah, so I'm looking forward to that, like growing that backlist. Yeah.
I'll just say from our perspective, the first book had slowed down, as they do.
Yeah.
The second book's come out and now we're starting to sell the first book again.
Oh,
So
that's great.
you do get that little time effect.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
And you're hearing with COVID that readers are being more conservative, they're going back and reading things that they're sure of. They're rereading things, and publishing houses are rebranding and publishing older books rather than bringing on newbie authors as well. You're hearing that as a general climate situation.
Yeah, COVID has been quite a remarkable time for the publishing industry in that, you know, writers couldn't travel, they couldn't have their book tours, writers' festivals were cancelled. I did a lot of online events. I've got an online event this weekend where it's like a big book club, and, you know, it's a blessing and a curse. So obviously meeting people I love this, and most writers do, being able to meet their readers in person. But I've had all those opportunities online. But, you know, it's been booksellers, you know, in Melbourne, they've shut, and they'd have to do home deliveries and so forth. So there's been a lot of innovation, and there's, you know, I think a lot of the changes that have taken place will stick. And so writers will continue now to do online events. And right now I can speak to people that are not even here. And so that's amazing. You know, there's that side of it. But, you know, for publishers, it has been really tough, and for booksellers it's been tough. So, and yeah, I think our tastes change. Yeah, I mean, I went back and reread a lot of books that are my absolute favourites again when I was in lockdown, because I wanted comfort. I wanted something that I knew had a happy ending. I write happy endings. I want my novels to, you know, give you that feel-good feeling at the end. So, yeah.
Do you like to stretch out into other genres, or do you prefer just fiction?
I definitely would like to. Yeah, wouldn't write a police procedural. That's not really me. I didn't ever think of myself as a historical fiction writer. That's something that really was, my publisher wanted me to do that, and it's because my writing style suits more historical fiction setting, and the themes I write about, these are women who, you know, my first novel's in 1958 and the second starts in 1955. You know, it's that social setting of the 50s is very much a constraint upon the women just by nature of when they are existing and so forth, and so that's been really great to write with, and it's an era that we know a lot about, and there's a lot of TV shows, you know, Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, and we love that era. So I'm enjoying writing historical fiction at the moment. I've written a contemporary fiction novel before that's unpublishable. It was too much invested with the angst of my 19 years of age and not much knowledge of the world. But I think I could write a contemporary fiction. I would love to try something else. I wouldn't want to be, I guess, shoehorned into a particular genre. I feel that I love when writers try something new. So. Yeah, but at the moment, my next novel that I'm writing, it's a historical fiction novel. There's just so much in Far North Queensland, in particular when I'm writing here, you know, and the Atherton Tablelands. Because it's in the wake of the Second World War, my own grandfather was here on the Tablelands. He served in New Guinea, as it was then called, and he was on the Tablelands for jungle training. So that's something I'd ever since I was a child had known about that. I'd known about my grandparents' 4-day honeymoon, and I knew she'd come up here to see him, and I knew my dad was conceived in the war, and it's something that I already loved, and so that I without knowing it, already loved history. And I certainly grew up sitting beside my grandparents, hearing their stories of motherhood and young families and dating and getting married in the 50s and 60s, and so that's probably something that has influenced as well what I write and what I'm interested in is, yeah.
Have your kids read your books?
Dash, my 16-now-year-old son, has read my first novel, and I didn't know how he'd go with that because he's probably more a fantasy and he probably reads more fantasy, and but once he started the novel he couldn't put it down, and actually something he said to me was that he's never forgotten the feeling of reading it, and he wishes he could live in Noah Vale, which I thought was a bit rude because I said, but I've written the valley we live in, but no. But no, he said he's never forgotten that feeling, and I know he had a soft spot for one of my characters and he found the other character a little bit overbearing, and I tried to not take that personally, that it might be like his mother, but no, he hasn't read the second book yet. I have given already the novels to my nearly 15-year-old daughter, and she left it. She read the first page, then shut it and put it away. So she's not ready for that. So maybe that's a difference between daughters and sons. I'm not sure, but no, he was very proud of me. It's funny that they don't even read the novels, but my kids are so proud of me, and they, will take pictures in bookstores and just think it's amazing, but they wouldn't know if I've written nonsense, really. Yeah. Well, that's about it. I just wanted to thank you all for coming and letting me tell you all about my books and my journey to publication and everything. And thank you to those of you who are watching now and joining us later. It's been my privilege to be here today. So thank you very much.
So here we go. I'd like to thank Averil again. Thank
Oh,
you very much.
thank you. Thank you. It's absolutely beautiful. Thank you very much, everyone.
Put the paper on that.
Oh, yeah. Beautiful.
Thanks for coming, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. Thank you. And there's some books over there for sale as usual.